Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Lancaster Criminal Justice Meeting. We'd like to call the meeting to order, please.
Commissioners Brown, Fuller,
Present.
Harris, Herr,
Present.
Mercy,
Present.
Vice Chair Rodriguez,
Present.
Chairman Little.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Invocation. Mr. Cliff Huffmeyer, please stand, everyone, please.
Let's pray. Father, we thank you for the opportunity to come and intercede for this group of people. I thank you for them and for the fact that you have raised them up to govern our good city. We pray, Lord, that you would give them wisdom, that they might truly understand the issues that they're facing today, and that they might know that you have ordained that they be in this position of authority for our good. And we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
I'd like to take a moment of silence for Leroy Halley, who passed away, who was a civic leader. So a few minutes, please. Thank you. Flag salute. Jen, would you like to lead some flag salute?
Oh, yes. Please follow my lead. Ready to begin?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Any presentations at all? None? Nothing on agendized items? Kathleen, nothing? Has everyone had a chance to read the minutes of consent? Approval of minutes of May 8th?
Yes.
Can I entertain?
Move approval.
I second.
We have a motion to approve and a second. Please vote. 5-0. Let's get right into our crime reports. Hi, how are you?
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Happy Father's Day for those that are celebrating Father's Day this weekend.
Thank you.
We're going to start with our Crime Commission report for April. For our burglaries, we had a total of 57 burglaries. For residential burglaries, we had 30. Commercial, we had 27. For our robberies, we had a total of 33. Armed were 20. Strong-armed were 13. We continue to do our crime prevention through our social media, public announcements. We'd use Nixle, go to our neighborhood watch meetings, and our business before breakfast. On our first slide, we have our monthly coffee with the deputy over at Crazy Autos. We had a presenter there who spoke about autism and what they do for their little school that they have here in the Antelope Valley. It's behaviors of autism. So we had a pretty good turnout for that one. A lot of engagement in the community. For our other engagement that we had was our Lancaster Baptist Church Career Fair. We had our detectives from our station go out and talk to the kids about what they do in their positions. Our deputies went to the Boulevard this month. The month of April is the Sexual Awareness Month, so they were at the SARS booth passing out stickers to the kids, making people aware of reporting sexual awareness. For this one, we have our Boys and Girls Club. We went to the Boys and Girls Club along with Tarzana Treatment Center to talk to the youth about what we do as law enforcement, just to get them to engage with us and not to be afraid of, reporting stuff with us, and spoke to them as far as like what goals they had, and it was a good conversation with them. The other engagement that we did was we did an autism presentation at the Behavioral Solutions in Spanish. We do have a small group in our community, Hispanic community, that wanted us to talk to them about what we encounter when, their children are approached by law enforcement. So it was all in Spanish. Deputy Hita, he himself has an autistic child, so he related to the parents there. And of course, we had our Poppy Festival that in April, and I had my volunteers out there to help me out. So that was a great event that we always attend. Our next presentation will be our ComStat for the city of Lancaster. Thank you, ma'am. We're going to start with our homicides. We're at our average of 1. Rapes, we're at 11 for the month of April. Is that the wrong one? Hold on, it's the other one, sorry. Sorry about that. So our monthly trends for April, like I said, homicides, we are at 1. Our rapes are at 11. Robberies are up at 33. Our aggravated assaults are down. Our domestic violence is down as well. Our burglaries are at 57. Our larcenies, little spike in April at about 45 or 150. Our grand theft are also down at about 39 or 38. And our arsons are up in April to 7. And this is our heat map for the area where we have most of our activity, which is, or most of our heat is in the shopping center area. Any questions on these?
Just to put that in a little perspective, I know you look at the numbers and it's hard to remember where we were at last month or whatever. Rapes were up last month. I looked at Palmdale. They also saw a spike. A little numbers-wise, about the same as ours. Percentage-wise, a little more significant. Looking at the reported rapes, it was all they were all some kind of association type thing. And if you'll notice, it was the same month as Sexual Assault Awareness Month, where you always seem to have a spike in a month like that because people have not reported something for whatever reason, and it brings to their attention. Now they're going to report it. But year to date, if you take out that monthly spike, we're still down almost 18% on rapes for the year. So that looks like a little blip. I attribute it mostly to the awareness that was brought forward. Crimes against person in general, rapes, homicides, aggravated assaults. We had the lowest month of the year. We saw that the aggravated assaults and domestic violence, which typically drives our aggravated assaults, is domestic violence, has gone down. I think a lot of that has been due in part to our really emphasizing the programs that are out there to try to break that cycle of violence, because we've seen that with our murders this year. 3 of the 4 have had some kind of domestic component to it, and then the 4th was just an oddball chance confrontation that probably shouldn't have been a murder. It was an older gentleman was punched and fell and hit his head. All of them have been identified or are in custody. Robberies, we've had a trend spiking up this year, but we've looked at them, and what's really driving them are what's called Estes robberies, which is basically a shoplifting that turns into a robbery because of security, or an employee tries to stop them and there's some kind of struggle. So now there's a struggle, it's a robbery. It's not so much armed or what you would think of as traditional robbery. It's these shoplifting robberies are driving that. So what we're doing with that to try to curb that and bring that down is bringing it to the attention of our repeat locations and our security companies, just bring their attention to the liability and the danger they take when they become involved in a physical struggle with someone over a candy bar or a minor theft, and what it can actually turn into in a worst case scenario. We'll see how that affects that, but that's what we're seeing that drive. We also had 2 significant robbery arrests in the last month or so. We had a crew that was working in both the city area and then in the Quartz Hill area. They were doing armed robberies of Subways and Pizza Huts. We had them good for about 6 or 7 in the Antelope Valley area that we identified them for. They're both in custody. And then we had another crew that was working in the, we had them identified as doing robberies in the unincorporated area. Those we made them for, they're in custody, but I suspect that if you're robbing the unincorporated area, you're probably committing crimes here too. So we think that will also have a significant effect. Burglaries, looking at our numbers, like they've been down, looking year to date, preliminary numbers now, down today, they're significantly down 30%, which we're very happy with. And also grand theft autos, which plagued this area for a long time. Year to date, they're down about 15% too. Overall, preliminary today, or actually I pulled the numbers yesterday morning, preliminary, we're down a little over 6% in Part 1 crimes. So we're trending down, we're keeping it that way, and we just have our summer enforcement teams out now for the summer. They just kicked off. And then we're working with the trends that we know are going to pop up. Like the summertime, you get the juvenile home burglaries. The kids are off of school. They know this is a community where people commute and work. So we tend to see a spike in those in the summertime. So we're actively working, trying to get our guys out there to curb that and before it even really gets kicked off. But overall, Part 1 crimes are looking really good. And the numbers that are kind of driving them are categories that are very hard to tackle just on a patrol basis. So like I said, we're using whatever programs we can use to keep those at bay. But overall, we're looking really good for this time of year.
Any questions? No. Captain, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
And our last presentation will be the LEAPS progress report. During the month of April, LEAPS was dispatched 50 times, totaling 10.1 hours, and was airborne, providing strategic surveillance for 317.4 hours. The LEAPS provided airborne observation support in 5 arrests. LEAPS provides support for the 2019 Poppy Festival, additional support of Lancaster patrol deputies and detectives, including surveillance of specific targeted locations. Detectives used the system to obtain aerial imagery and data in the evidence gathering stages of property crimes and crimes against persons investigations. They had 5 arrests. They helped out with 3 fights and assaults, 5 burglaries, robberies, 4 traffic stops, 10 suspicious circumstances, and 2 persons with guns. 38% of it was people observation, 10% was property, 17% was arrest and detentions, 14% vehicles, and 21% observations. Oh, sorry about that. Any questions on the LEAPS? Thank you. Next time I see you will probably be after 4th of July, so have a nice 4th of July and keep hydrated.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Probation Department, sir. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Good morning. Once again, good morning to all of you.
Good morning.
Thanks for having us. We always feel good to be part of the community. With the The statistics that I'm going to share with you is regards to all of the Antelope Valley, including the Palmdale area, so it's not specific just to Lancaster. This was the AB1 office that we have here. We're trying to get the juvenile statistics and the adult statistics from the courthouse. We're trying to get that together. It's a different director, so we're trying to organize that so we can have them a little bit more specific and broader numbers. At our particular office over on Division and K4, we supervise 404 actual cases that are the most, in my opinion, sophisticated probationers probably in the country, coming from LA County. They have long rap sheets. It's through the AB109 program. And it seems like every month we're getting more sophisticated cases being released from the prison system into our population in the community. So it is trying at times, but I think we're doing a pretty decent job of it. We had 14 violations last month, 16 warrant issues. We had 24 warrants recalled that we either caught the person, found them, and then they went to court and they recalled the warrants in that aspect. We had 653 office visits, 111 field contacts, and another 78 that we had no contact because that person was either not home or out of the area at that moment. Some were working. We're down to about 18 particular cases of transient homeless on our caseload, so we're minimizing that as best we can. At one time, we were in the high 40s and maybe even low 50s, and we've gotten them, we've placed them in transitional housing of some type, and so that's been beneficial to get them off the street and have some type of safe place to stay with food and showers and things of that nature. One of the things that we did last month on May 23rd, and I was hoping to see somebody there, I was hoping to see the Antelope Valley Press there. One of my big issues as a supervisor, we had over 45 vendors show up for our resource fair. This is a fair that was dedicated to people with felony convictions or history. Most of them were from our office. We invited parole. Over 400 people showed up. We had, like I said, 45 vendors, and we had to turn away about 10 more because we just didn't have the space. It was our first one ever. And within a half hour, we had vendors saying, can we do this again? We had dentists show up that they were giving exams. We had people giving away clothing for suits and ties for interviews, business suits for women. We had people offering jobs. So it was disappointing, I guess, if you will, because if these guys commit a crime, they're going to make the front page. But when we do something like this with the community, no one knows about it. So for me personally, it was a little disappointing because we invited the AV Press and others to come. Thankfully, Bishop Hearns showed up, and a representative from Senator Wilkes' office showed up and shared their appreciation. And it turned out way better than I ever expected. It was kind of mind-blowing how many people showed up, and there was a line through our parking lot. I wish I have a video, but I don't have the access to the computer. I would have been happy to share with you, but when we invite 400 felons to one location, the initial concern is, are there going to be rival gangs there? Is there going to be confrontation situations? And the buzz was completely opposite. The buzz was positive. We had people leaning over trash cans, filling out job applications, and there was hope. There was nobody in front of them that had any different qualifications than they do. Everybody was there, had a criminal record, and the people out of the public that came, the vendors, were well aware of that. And again, we had Sam's Club donate food. We had Bimbo Bread donate stuff. Some of the probation officers that worked there, everybody pitched in. We were able to provide them with lunch. We barbecued hot dogs and hot links. So everybody got fed. Everybody had a good time. And the only thing that didn't cooperate was the weather. It was a cold day for the end of May. So, but hopefully, if we do it again, I'd like to see a little bit more community support, because the ones that did show up was outstanding. And it kind of gave us a little bit of bragging rights to show that there is an alternative way of trying to help people that have made mistakes. And they're not the same people they were 20 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, but neither are we. We make better decisions as we mature and stuff. So anyway, it's always an appreciation to be here to speak in front of you all, and I hope that we're bringing something to the table every month. So that's what I got for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Have a great day.
Thank you. You too. Gil, how are you, sir?
Good morning. Thank you. I'm doing well.
Good.
Thanks. Good to see you all again. It's
You
been a
too.
while. Okay, so I'll start off with just some statistics for the partial month of April and May. Our fatalities are at, we have 13 fatalities year to date. We're in line pretty much with our 2017 stats. 2017, we had 26 fatalities for the entire year. In 2018, we actually had a big hike. We went up to 41 fatalities for the entire year. That's been a 10-year high. And I'll talk about as to what we're doing with that. Traffic collisions are up by 7%. DUI traffic collisions are up by 29%. Our DUI arrests are up by 21%. So we're staying within line with the TCs and the or traffic collisions and the arrests. The arrests were at 305 DUI arrests compared to 251 last year, year to date. One of the things that we're doing here in the Alamo Valley to reduce the is what we call the fatalities fatal reduction enforcement operation. We started at May 3rd. These task force or this task force focuses on the areas of that are problematic, like Bouquet Canyon, Elizabeth Lake Road, San Francisco Canyon, Soledad Canyon, Crown Valley, Sierra Highway, Angeles Forest, and the east portion of the county. Since then, since May 3rd, we've issued 292 citations. I personally worked the operation on Friday at Spunky Canyon at San Francisco and issued 14 citations within a 2.5-hour period for the stop sign. It just seems like that stop sign is invisible. But we got really good feedback from the community. We started chirping the sirens at 5 o'clock in the morning. Good morning wake-up call to everybody in Green Valley. They appreciated the fact that we were out there. They actually bought us, I was going to say a drink, but it was a soda. And this operation will continue until the grant cycle ends, which will be September 31st. We're actually sending out this task force 2 to 3 times a week. They'll be working the east portion of the valley on Friday. Today, we're actually on the 138. Which is another problematic area. When it comes to community engagement, we had 2 events that we actually partnered up with Tarzana Treatment Center. One was the National Prescription Drug Take Back Day that we held April 27th with Kaiser. We collected 179 pounds of prescription drugs that people turned in. We're actually going to be working on doing another Take Back Day. I believe it's in October. So this is a need that we have out there. Being at the Illegal Dumping Task Force meeting last week, it seems like the community is turning a lot of these prescription drugs in during these cleanups, which could be problematic because we're not ensuring that these prescription drugs are actually being disposed and destroyed accordingly. So we'll be educating a little bit more on that. The other event that we had with Tarzana was National Prevention Week, which is Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. It was the week where it was the awareness week to bring awareness to mental abuse and substance abuse. So we had a seminar, and that was very well attended as well. I had 5 car seat safety presentations in the month of May. One event was Age Well Drive Smart, which is it's a presentation geared towards citizens that are 55 and over that are driving, and we pretty much talked to them about the basics, the dangers, and that come along with maturing. So that was put together by Scott Will's office and Assemblyman Lackey's office. It was a very well attended. Again, we had 350 attendees at this presentation / class. Along with that, Captain Bronier hosted the California Police Officer Association seminar, which it was a records release when it comes to use of force for police officers, releasing records and so on. So that was very well attended as well. That was on May 31st. Additionally, we attended the Frog Fest Festival, the AV Taco Festival. I attended the Taco Festival. It was great. And my volunteers provided traffic control for the Chair Parade in Leona Valley. And those are just to name a few of the events that we actually had during the month of May.
Any questions for Cap? Anything? Bill, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Everything you do, thank you so much. District Attorney's Office.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'll reintroduce myself to you. My name's Micah Piantanita. I'm the Assistant Head Deputy of the Antelope Valley or the Lancaster DA's office. I'm here on behalf of the DA's office. Mr. Sherwood is out of town today. I have just a few brief statistics for you on our filings for the month of May. From cases that were presented to our office from the Lancaster Sheriff's Station, both our felony and our misdemeanor filings are up. In April, we filed 309 misdemeanor cases. In May, we filed 316 misdemeanor complaints. For felonies, in April, we had 118 felony complaints, and in May, the numbers are up slightly again for 121 felony complaints. That's all I have for you today.
Any questions? Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right. Mr. Dorico? Oh,
I'll go first if that's okay.
you're the boss.
Good morning.
Huh?
Yes, it's okay.
Right.
I have a couple.
The respect, it's so awe-inspiring. Good morning. You'll recall last month we were talking quite a bit about problem properties, particularly rental properties. We were focusing quite a bit on absentee landlords and just problem rentals in general. Vice Mayor Christ made a comment concerning a list, perhaps, of some approved or pre-approved property managers or management companies that we might be able to provide landlords should they need assistance. I've looked into that a little bit. I had thrown out the possibility of maybe putting out a request for information of some sort, and I've spoken with our purchasing division as well. And it looks like something that we can do without really running afoul of sort of the inappropriateness that can possibly go along with that. I've put together some criteria that we'll be looking for. We'll get it out there into the community at large, and we'll come up with a list of, not per se we're approving these people, but these people or companies have met the basic criterion that we're looking for, and then it's up to the rental owner to make the determination about whether that property manager is an appropriate match for them. So we'll be working on that over the course of the next month or so. Following last month's meeting, Meg, you remember Meg, our paralegal, had what I thought was a great idea. She asked if we could revise the rental housing ordinance to require that if we have a landlord who does not live in the immediate area, say a 25 or 30-mile radius here, that we can mandate that they retain a professional property manager. We did some research, not seeing anything in state statute or case law that would prohibit us from doing that. So we're going to go ahead and make some revisions to the rental housing ordinance to include that requirement. We're also going to revise it so that even a local landlord, if a local landlord consistently has problem rental properties, and we'll come up with some criteria for, parameters for what that means in terms of measurement, if you will, that we can require even a local landlord to retain professional property management. And hopefully that'll sort of chip away at some of the problems we've had with neglectful and irresponsible rental owners. We're also going to fill a couple of gaps in the existing ordinance. Right now, it doesn't allow for reinspection of a rental property where there has been no violation of any kind. And I think that it's appropriate, even with a responsible landlord, that every few or several years, we should probably go back in and take a look and make sure that things are still okay. So we're just going to make a few tweaks to the ordinance. We're going to get the request for information or the request for qualifications out here probably in the next 2 or 3 weeks. It's my expectation that we'll have that revised ordinance to you for the July meeting. We'll have it in advance of that, so you'll have plenty of opportunity to review it and provide any questions or comments you might have. I think that's it I have for today. Everybody okay over there? Okay. Nothing to see. Nothing to see. That's all I have.
I would like to make one comment in respect to making outer outer area owners have a property management agreement. Being in the business, I would only suggest that perhaps we give them the same approach we give the local owners in respect to if there's certain violations. Because I do know that there are outer property owners that do take good care of their properties. I've had them as clients, and I don't have them as clients, and I'd hate to penalize them just because and stop the investors from out of the area wanting to come here because of that, and just mandate that after a certain amount of calls or whatever, then they're required.
Certainly.
It's just, I just think in an act of fairness.
Absolutely happy to take that into consideration, and probably we should, we'll have some internal conversation about what sort of markers we're looking at where, red flags are raised, and then we should have some conversation about that next month when we bring the ordinance as well.
Yeah, and I think on a side note to that, too, is understanding as it relates to how the city's contacted regarding a problem, okay? So, in other words, someone who maybe be in statuses where they're being evicted, and then suddenly we're getting phone calls into the city's building department or code enforcement about supposed housing quality standards after they've been living in a location for a period of time. Okay, so we get a lot of those things. So in talking to code enforcement, how do we evaluate those complaints? Is it a tenant-caused issue, or was it a pre-existing condition that should have been addressed when they moved in the location? Okay, is it something to withhold rent as it relates to housing quality standards for the point of because they just don't want to pay the rent? I mean, there's a lot of things to look at as we look at this as an approach just based on the calls. So we need to evaluate what the call, how it was generated, what's the motivation behind it.
And I do want to add, just for what it's worth, in speaking with code enforcement recently, we have a couple of local, rather large property management companies that are themselves not responsible property managers. So we have a lot of active code enforcement cases that are managed by the same couple of companies. So we're going to be having office conferences with those companies and see what we can do about working collaboratively to get them back up to par. We have a pretty big stick there to use because if they don't have a local city business license, they can't conduct business in the city. So I think that the incentive will be there for them to work in cooperation with us and bring those properties up to par.
How often are the rental properties inspected by the city? Is it once a year?
It's a sliding scale. When the ordinance was originally adopted, I think it was in 2006 or 2007, somewhere around there, they went through every property, theoretically. That took a couple of years. And then based on whether there were major violations or minor violations, whether those minor violations were corrected or timely corrected, then it was on a sliding scale. It was 1 year if you'd had a major violation. It was reinspection every 2 or 3 years, depending on the severity of other kinds of violations. And that's still kind of the way it works right now. But we do have this gap about some that weren't problems, but I think we should just make sure that everything's still copacetic at every rental.
And the property manager or owner has to be approved and go through a class and understand what the city is asking for?
The land cap training is really for primarily for multifamily landlords. Certainly single-family residential landlords could go through the program as well, but I'll defer to Lee in that regard.
We do try to do them at least twice a year, but sometimes quarterly, depending on need and for getting people back into their status as a land cap property. But we always invite single-family landlords or anyone that would like to attend to that landlord training. It's quite extensive. It's 8 to 10 hours and broken up in blocks, and the discussions, even we bring in attorneys and everything else as well, and presentations on how to properly screen potential tenants, what the expectation is based on housing quality standards for your property, what the law says you have to do as a landlord, what's required for the tenants, those type of issues. Okay, and so hopefully trying to get in front of a lot of these issues. It's certainly something that I believe that it would be a good thing to do for any private landlord as well as anyone that works with a major company, because I think there's value in it. And so, again, we put that out there.
For some reason, I thought it was mandatory, but it's not.
It is mandatory for land cap certification. So if you're in a multi-family apartment complex, because that was our focus initially, and you probably remember this some time ago, and I know the Vice Mayor will remember that as he was the chairman at the Crime Commission at the time, we did active studies and determined that over 60% of reported crime in our city was occurring in multi-family, large density locations in rental property. So that became the focus and the initiation of the land cap program. Of course, it's expanded since then into various duties. We're now we did a whole reorganization, Captain Weber did, at the station in the fall. That's resulted in some movement with our teams and refocusing that to address problems. Obviously, you can see by the numbers he talked about today, there's been significant success as it relates to that, okay? So we always want to be in front of these things as they come forward. At the same time, there is still continued value in maintaining the certification for those properties. If it's something that you as a commission believe is appropriate for us to expand into as it relates to any rental property, I'm with you on that one. I think the more we can educate the community on both sides of the fence, tenants as well as landlords, we're going to be in a better situation down the road. And I think we'll probably see a lot of relief on the civil side of the courthouse as it relates to those issues too, if we can resolve that, because I'm sure there's quite an expense associated. So I would love to entertain that, because I believe just from our community-based model, that makes a lot of sense.
Can we apply the special taxes with the
Oh, please,
the problem?
I wish.
Well, actually, City of LA, they are looking into it, and it's called that vacant property tax. Do we have a power to do that, or just finger points?
Vacant property tax?
By some area?
Is that what you said, a vacant property tax?
Vacant.
Yes,
Really?
they're looking into it. Yeah.
As with any tax, obviously, City Council is going to be the directing body on that, and as with any tax, it's a Prop 218 thing. It has to go out to a vote of the people. So, you've seen what's happened with some of the recent measures down below that have failed miserably. So I don't know if there's will there for any new kind of a tax, but quite frankly, that's above my pay grade. That's not in my purview to make that determination about whether we proceed down that path. I think conceptually it's not the worst idea at all. I think there's also things we can talk about. We may have touched on it last month, I believe, about bank-owned properties or properties that are in default and the bank won't complete foreclosure because they don't want it on their books. And what do you do about those properties? Do we want to do an ordinance that requires them to at least be registered so we know where they are, or something along those lines? There are some things we can explore. I think if we start with some of these basic things, beef up our rental ordinance, get this property management sort of piece in place, and see how progress is made there, and then we can continue to reassess this as we move forward.
Can't we adjust their license rates? So if an individual went in, they had land cap certification, it would be $100. If they don't, then it's $200. We make them an incentive to get the training.
Oh, we absolutely could do that.
Why don't we look at that?
Certainly. And we could include, if you'd like, depending on the scope you want to look at, single-family residents that don't go through the land cap certification.
I think we should make it available to everybody.
Okay. Absolutely.
I think that would be a good way to do it rather than the taxes.
It's
Make
a
it
good
based
idea.
upon their. Is that what you're looking for, Jen?
Yes. And I think,
Well, I can give you an example just locally that we have just from a resource management, where it's actually by actively and being involved with a certain property owner and resources that were being utilized to police that property. At one location in our city, we had one property that was about 800 calls for service per year between the Sheriff's Department and the Fire Department responses to that location. By actively bringing in our land cap certification into that property and working closely with all of us as community partners, we were able to resolve that issue down to almost 0 calls for service over the past 8 months, and at no cost to the property owner. So just by collaborating together, working on a proper screening process based on person's eligibility to reside in that location, and then certain persons, because of their lack of eligibility to be removed there, created an issue there that it's a very nice environment now for the tenants that exist there now. And again, that didn't cost anyone any money other than the initial contact. But you can see on the backside, when you look at what these resources cost for a response, we're going to save a lot of money just by that involvement.
Problem homes that are vacant have been vacant for quite some time, and banks are sitting out there. And do you reach out to the banks or the trustee holders? And I know.
Well, you know,
but is there a way of like what the vice mayor said, as far as putting more of a pressure on them to move efficiently or quickly? Because I do know they drag their feet.
They do.
Very much. Very much.
We do try. We do reach out. We send letters to the lender if it's a walkaway or if it's a default foreclosure limbo kind of a thing or what have you. And I think we've talked about this before. I've had phone conversations with lawyers for some of the larger banks who have just flat out said, I can't even find it on my books, and I wouldn't want to find it even if I could. I don't want it on my books. Go ahead and get a receiver who takes a priority over my lien. I don't care. So.
And obviously, we as a city move forward as far as leaning stuff on properties, and so if the property sells, if it gets to that point, the bank is going to have to, if they come forward eventually, let's say, they're going to have to take care of that.
Right. If the city does an abatement, we lien the property, and then it just sits there on the property until such time as it may turn, and then we'll presumably get our abatement costs refunded. But that can be a years-long process. I have liens on the books going back for 10 years, 10, 12 years.
An abatement, so would that include service calls to a property that's been broken into and you're cleaning it out, or whatever it may be? Because I'm assuming surrounding neighbors get very upset as far as.
Well, we've had a property that we have a letter of agency, and the captain has helped us out with it, but at the same time, I'm just not sure what the actual law can be changed locally or ordinance to create more of a situation, because we have a house that we have a letter of agency. It's been vacant for about 3-4 months. We rehabbed it. We're waiting for another property to put it on the market. Long story short, within 3 weeks of me being by the property, they'd gone in and take complete control of the property. And it's just, I don't know what the answer is, but if we could put a better bite in our local ordinances that does something when people move into a property, when the proper paperwork is in place, like a letter of agency, I don't know, but it'd be helpful if we could.
Yeah,
That
but
is
again,
more likely homeless issues, right?
Right.
It is.
It is.
some of it is, and some of it is been created. And let's go back historically. When we had a numerous amount of foreclosed properties, we had REO managers out there that were operating out there to take control of the properties. The banks were not doing the conversion, right? So we had the original property owner's name still on title. They were offering people cash for keys to move out, as incentivizing people. So we dealt with an issue of individuals that went and took residency in these places, and rather than being removed by law enforcement for trespassing in those locations without valid contracts, they were paid money to move. So we created an animal that moved people around, incentivized them to take over properties, and that happened all over the place. I think the biggest thing is other cities have moved forwards to create ordinances that forced institutions to take control of the property and take ownership of it in a period of time that required them to then take the loss. I don't know where those went, to be perfectly honest with you. What happened with the case law? I know there was a significant litigation over that, some of those issues, when you can force an individual institution to take control of that property and claim it as a loss. Okay, because remember what we're having with short sales, right? You got to go backwards and try and find the person who's on title on the house to get them to sign off on a house they haven't even been in a year. Okay, so that made problems for the real estate folks out there. And then the biggest thing for the REO managers is they weren't being reimbursed until the property was sold. So what happened is we saw folks come in, do the proper things to secure the property, beautify the property so it wasn't blighted in a nice neighborhood that was a place in foreclosure, spent significant money out of their own pocket, only not to be reimbursed by the banks at some point, because the banks didn't suffer the loss. The individual REO manager did. So there's a lot of issues here, and I think we should have further discussion on the things that we can put in place. We're not where we were in 2008, right? But we still have this created issue. And we've had these stories, and Captain Weber can tell you this, where a real estate agent comes out to a property, the people move out, they've posted the property, put a sign on it, and some people that are trolling the neighborhoods come and move in. The neighbors call because people are moving into the house. They take the sign down. You go there, they have some dummied contract up that either some illicit person sold them and invited them there that was on Craigslist or the internet, or this person is the person actively doing the deviant
Exactly
behavior
right.
there. So that's where we go. And what is that? Is that something we handle from the Sheriff's Department? Well, really more of it's looked at it like a civil issue rather than a trespassing issue. Do we develop something on our side for the enforcement value on our side to take an active investigation in that and remove the people from the property? So that's probably what we need to identify how we want to manage that.
Is it possible we start by putting together some type of a committee to start looking at this? If so, I'm very interested in being a part of it.
We can certainly do that, and in that context, it might be an appropriate forum for us to sort of flesh out some of the things that we already do, because we're really pretty, with code enforcement and with public safety, we're really pretty vigorous and aggressive where it's appropriate to be so. If we see a house that's been squatted, we have a lot of tools to get that to get those people out, to get it boarded up and secured. Now, keeping it secured is a problem, but we've got orders to vacate that can be duly issued by the building official that allow us to eject people from the premises if there are unsanitary or hazardous conditions. And pretty much a house that's being squatted is just de facto going to have unsanitary and hazardous conditions. It's just the nature of the beast. So we do already have some tools that we use. We can try to make them more robust. There are some limits to what we can do, but I think a committee and then fleshing that out in greater detail is probably a really great idea.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thanks, Charleston. Lee?
Hi. First, I'd like to introduce, as you know, we're deeply involved in developing this hybrid model for law enforcement. Our vice president of our consulting firm, Hillard Hines, is here. Robert Haas is here. I just want to introduce him. This is his first time with our group. We've had other representatives that have been here in the past. I will tell you that this has been a enlightening and educational process as we work with them. They bring a lot of experience to the table. I want to thank Captain Weber and for the participation from the station and the Sheriff's Department as well as downtown as we go through this process and as we try and work all these things out and flush them out and where all this will land. But I think it's coming together very well, and those discussions have been excellent discussions. So I'm looking forward to see the result of that. Thanks, Robert, for coming in here today. I kind of warned him that we didn't have a presentation or anything, but we're going to behave ourselves today in here. So leading into that, one of the things I want to talk about today is Greg Coleman, who's one of our law enforcement technicians who is assigned to the LANCAP program with Captain Weber's team there, is out actively doing the recertifications and neighborhood watch aspect and crime prevention aspect of those LANCAP certifications. So that's taking place as we speak for several weeks now, and we're going to move through that process to make sure we get everyone back up to speed. And I love the Vice Mayor's idea about incentivizing that participation. I think that will help us get more cooperation. For the most part, we have very active property management in our apartment complexes, especially as they like to actively work with the Sheriff's Department, us in the Public Safety Office. But of course, the more the better as it relates to that, and so we can share information. One of the things I wanted to tell you about is I was invited into a new group that's meeting once a month and brought in some other agencies into the area to identify and work more collaboratively with us from a enforcement standpoint for community partners. But the meeting was a great meeting that we had, and we're going to meet regularly, that was held at the DA's office with the DA investigators as well as members from the LA DA's office. And I want to give you an idea of some of the players that were in the room. The FBI, the Office of Inspector General from HUD, USDA and Social Security. We had the Department of Social Services, LA County and DCFS, the LA Sheriff, the U.S. Postal Inspectors, LA County Animal Control, also all the state agency representatives from enforcement, from alcohol to tobacco, from Board of Equalization and Consumer Affairs. So it gives us more active involvement with these other agencies in identifying issues in our community and resources to bring to the table to deal with issues. It was a very good meeting, and I'm looking forward to more of that. We're going to actually be doing a training here in the end of July, and I would like to invite you to come to it. Okay, there's cybercrime discussions. There's all kinds of things that are going on there. So I appreciate the DA's office hosting this and putting this group together, and I think it'll be interesting to see what develops from it. So that's just more tools for all of us to deal with whatever issues we're having in the community, and especially as it relates to some of these agencies and who they represent. Great resource.
I'm very interested, Lee, I'm sorry. I'd be very interested in attending that if it came up again in the fall. Thank you.
Yes, I will send it out. We will have periodic meetings, but the training aspect, I think, is going to be very good. Okay, it's going to be focused on cybercrime. But these are government fraud experts and things as well. So this is an excellent, excellent program. We continue to deal with significant issues as it relates to homelessness. You know, our contract guys out there, primarily that's what they're doing right now. Of the 4 people we have out there, we follow a process that you're well aware of now by posting these camps, bringing in LASA or these other advocacy groups to make contact with these individuals. But I must tell you, one of the things that we're identifying more and more is the true addiction aspect of this. And as we talk about things that maybe impact homelessness, and I truly believe that our council has directed the city staff, and our city is probably one of the most active out there in trying to manage this issue within our community with the true investment we're making in housing with Kensington and things we're doing and working closely with our agencies out there. But I will tell you, one of the things I believe is a missing link for us is true institutional drug addiction treatment. I think that's something that's the key. I've been following closely other major cities. I believe New Hampshire is going a direction that way, where we're not just talking about giving someone a place to live, but what kind of treatment involvement do we have as it relates to that for this person to truly get off drugs. And being on methadone is not, you're still an addict. Okay, I'm sorry, but those type of programs, sure, there's just some process for that, but at some point people need to be off drugs. And I'm looking at a turnaround that's going on with Seattle, and I told you all about that video that was out there for Seattle's Burning, and they're taking on that active approach with true addiction. So I have another discussion with Tarzana, but we've talked to them recently too, as we have this intake process where people report based on the severity of whatever things have put in by the court. But the reality of it is that these individuals are true addicts. It is beyond a choice. It's a true physiological need out there that I believe has a correlation and nexus to all the other crime, a majority of the crime we're dealing with in our community. So we're going to continue down that path, and I think those are discussions that are worthwhile, speaking of what may be potential alternatives for funding out there that may exist for that treatment. Okay. The next one is that we're looking at, and the LA County Probation Office has been doing community town halls and everything as it relates to diversion. As things with Prop 47 and Prop 57 related issues out there, the things that are most out front for us to develop programs for through alternative sentencing and diversion. So those are things we're currently working with. We're working with Judge Estes in the alternative court, and we've put together a great program together with Antelope Valley College and the Antelope Valley Union High School District Adult Ed for an educational model as it relates to sentencing in the alternative sentencing court. Jocelyn's currently writing on an MOU and the program outline as we develop that, and we'll be bringing it back to the court for their approval, and even where we're dedicating city resources to supervise that and report out to the court. So I think there's a lot of promise in that as developing these individuals who, and this is Veterans Court, this is the Homeless Court, this is the Drug Court, Homeless, Mental Health, and Veterans Court. So, and that went from being a court that met like twice a month to 5 days a week now. Dennis Vincent is doing a great job in there from the DA side. I know the public defender's overwhelming there as well, and I think their caseload's about 600 or so right now.
Yes, that's correct. That was the last number that I received from Dennis Vincent. He said that they have 600 active cases currently.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive for one court and one DA and one person from the public defender's office and everything. So as we're developing this diversion model, those are probably active discussions too, as what is our participation level as it relates to that, based on, and I've had those discussions with our consultants too, and everything is how do we formulate these things and tie them together from a resource side. But that's a great program. I think it's bearing fruit. And the education aspect of it is create those opportunity, and on the other side of it, take away excuses. You participate, something positive will come from it. You make a choice not to, you're probably going to be back in another court, and it won't be so nice probably. But so those are a lot of things. The other thing we're doing, working with Tarzan, and we met this last week, was it? I think it was. I never know with me, right? Last week. And the focus in our responsible service for alcohol is focusing on underage drinking. And I think they have put together a very good program for outreach to our establishments in town that provide alcohol services or sell on the retail off-site problem issues we're having with underage drinking. So I would probably bring them forward at the next meeting to do a presentation on what that looks like for them, and then that outreach with your direction to make that a part of our responsible service out there. But I think it's a really good program they've put together. Okay? And that's, other than we have, what's that thing called up this week, Tracy? Oh, the Great Race coming on a week from Saturday downtown. It'll be a great event. It's an interesting thing. You should see some of the cars that are in this thing. They're all pre-World War II. And it's a long run that they run between locations, and they've picked our city as one of their stopovers. So we're going to have a festival downtown next Saturday. I believe the first car arrives at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Down on our boulevard, there's going to be over 200 cars down there. So that should be a pretty neat event. So I'd like to invite the public out to come see that. Lastly, social media, things we've done out there with Cinemark is really emphasizing heat safety for the summer and our summer safety programs, pool safety, those things alike that we put out every year. I invite the public, please go to the city's website, use the drop-down for public safety and see what information is out there available, and especially from our communications department as it relates to heat safety and locations you can go to beat the heat in our communities. That's all I have.
Before we get to the legislators, building on Commissioner Harris's comment about maybe forming a committee, in addition to Mr. Harris, who else might be interested? We can have up to three commissioners?
I would.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Question to Lee.
Go ahead, Jen.
I have a question, Lee. How seriously cities handling illegal gambling is going on throughout the city? I was going to ask you the question last meeting, but I was hoping you bring up the issue this time, but you didn't mention it, so.
It's an issue, and I will tell you that it's being effectively managed by our contract guys and as well as the special assignment deputies here to the city, work from Captain Weber. But what usually happens is this, is we have a landlord, someone comes in and says they want to open a internet cafe. Yeah, I got too much going on here. Okay, internet cafe.
I think not just the internet cafe. Some of those businesses is a decoy.
Right, I understand.
Yeah.
That's what I'm going to explain. Okay, so who needs internet cafes anymore? Okay, you can go to the public library and you can get a free phone that has internet capability. So the reality is what's happened is they open them up under that guise as a decoy, and they actually truly turn into a gambling facility, okay, where individuals can bring stolen property or money or whatever they take in there to have time. Captain Weber has these gaming machines that are about $10,000 a piece, stacked higher than the roof at the sheriff's station right now, where we've actively been closing these places down and seizing that property, as well as hundreds of computer monitors, servers, and everything else. But I will tell you, it's an issue, okay, as we move forward, and Chairman Little and I have talked about this, and he's done a great job of working with the property owners he represents not to look for certain things. That's certainly something we need to work with our commercial developers to identify those individuals that may approach them to start up some type of business like that, and then what to do when they discover it's occurring. So I will tell you that we're weekly addressing those. And we're going there at times of day when they're open, because they're not open during the day. Okay, they open typically after hours, where they have an expectation of enforcement. And so we adjust to do that. Okay, so truly, every week we have some scheduled this week. We have some scheduled next week for that service to enforce them, shut them down. Okay, seize property, and we do it weekly.
Just the internet cafes, and you're looking at some other businesses too, like smoke shops.
Yes, and as people bring them to where, and typically, I'll be honest with you,
arcades.
Pardon me?
Arcades as well.
Yeah, it's a group, though, identified group that they have identified that is facilitating this with those different type of businesses. So they're actively working it for major crimes and locally, and so we're getting a handle on it. I will promise you that Captain Weber's deputies that are working that are official on some of the
So do you do some kind of a sting operations? Sting? Do you do some kind of a sting operations with
We
those
do a myriad of
businesses?
things, but I'm not going to identify what we do.
Okay.
Okay, that would be not very smart on our part to educate them on how we do business. Okay, so I'm going to pass on that part of it. I will tell you we are actively looking at them. We will continue to aggressively enforce that. As they pop up, we address them. But just like what we're dealing with homelessness, right, is we're dealing with the volume that's putting us a lot more delayed based on the amount of resources we can apply to it at the time. But we'll continue to actively do that.
So I say that again, and I said earlier about the vacant properties. There's anything we can do with our power city. We can control the number of businesses like that.
That's it.
When we give them a license, they gotta apply the business
Well,
license.
we don't do that, though. We don't give them a license. See, that's the one thing.
I see.
A lot of these are being alerted. They're coming in and applying for that license, and when we shut them down, they just open up with another place with another straw and are trying to identify it as something. But again, our finance counter, that where people apply for business licenses, have become very savvy at identifying who those individuals may be, and they alert us immediately. Okay, so, and then when we know a place is already operating, how we actively address that. So we have a multiple ways of dealing with these issues as they come forward. But like we spoke earlier, it's easier for us to deal with it on the front side. We identify those people, and quite honestly, Jocelyn and I meet with them, and we're very direct. And we have people that just spill their guts immediately. We put a little pressure on them, and they fold. And
Well, another part of the problem is there are landlords out there, commercial property, that are so hard up to get a tenant, they will go ahead and overlook. I mean, we've had clients come to us and want to open up an arcade or something of that matter. When we tell them the requirements to get the certificate of occupancy and the license, they offer up a larger security deposit to bypass this. And you have an owner that has vacant property and needs to get someone in there, they'll gladly do that, and they don't even see your desk. That's the problem.
No, they will come up another way if they're operational. That's what I'm trying to say to you. It's just like we have places that will rent a commercial space for a night to have a DJ come in and have a big party, okay? But they put it on social media, they advertise it, there's a mechanism it gets somewhere, okay? So it's the Sheriff's Department has a whole unit that does nothing but go through the internet and social media to identify these things and give us alerts. So, and as those place, there has to be a mechanism for them to draw customers in there and know they're there. Do you see what I'm saying? So there's a multitude, but I don't want to go into all the details of how that's done in a forum like this. I'd be happy to talk to you offline about that.
Yeah, to piggyback on what you just said there too, Howard, on a lot of occasions that has happened, has come to me and I've said, go to the city. You go to the city. Go talk to the counter, tell them what you're going to do, and this and that and everything else, and don't even, that's where you start. Don't start with me.
And going back for years, my office at least, we know a handful of strip mall owners, developers who are just historically bad actors. It's massage hooker, it's illegal gambling, it's after-hours clubs, it's whatever, and they'll just take whatever they can get because they want the money. And so it may be a different illegal business, but it's the same kind of illegal businesses pattern going on. And we know some of those, at least some of them.
Mr. Chairman, can we move on? We may.
If the Vice Mayor doesn't mind, I wanted to make one comment about this homelessness issue because it pertains very importantly to the emergency department in a way that I think may not be immediately obvious, and that is homelessness runs in combination with drug addiction and drug abuse and with mental health. And so frequently what we find is that people who should be on mental health medications, antipsychotic medications, stop taking their medications. They substitute methamphetamine, which tends not to be a particularly good antipsychotic medication. And they get in lots of trouble. They've been up for 3 days. They're wildly psychotic. They come to the emergency department, and we treat them and try and get them back down. Now, all of us have had the experience of waiting to be seen in the emergency department. And what that almost always means is that there's not a bed available to get you back and take a look and see what episodic or emergency problem might exist. And part of the reason is that the beds are filled with people who have come in for these other problems, and because they're homeless, it's very hard to find follow-up for them. We're working with Tarzana, trying to find follow-up for them. So to the degree that we can be involved in any discussions that you guys might be having to try and solve this problem, it's a huge problem for the emergency department, and we'd love to be involved in any solutions that might help. So thank you for bringing it up. Thanks, Mr. President.
Anything else, Lee? Good?
Yeah.
Okay. Vanessa? How are you? Good morning.
Okay, good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, Vice Mayor. A few things I wanted to share with you. The Assembly passed AB 362, which would allow drug abusers to shoot up their drugs in taxpayers-funded facilities. They killed a bill, AB 162, that would prevent the state from taxing your text messages. Thank God for that. I wanted to fill you in on AB 392, which is the deadly force bill that passed the Assembly. This was something that was very close to Assemblyman Lackey's heart as he, as a former CHP officer. It was recently amended, and that defines the new necessary standard as reasonable and based off the totality of the circumstances known to or perceived by the officer at the time, rather than with the benefit of hindsight. So this amendment allowed law enforcement groups to pull their opposition from the bill. So the Assemblyman did vote on it. Law enforcement did support the bill. SB 230, that's a deadly force training bill. That passed out of the Senate, and it's been jointed to 392, which means it won't be operative unless 392 passes. So this bill calls for the training, retraining, and continued training for all law enforcement in California in regards to new guidelines for deadly force and implicit bias training, cultural competency training, de-escalation, time, distance, cover, concealment techniques, crisis intervention tactics. It creates policies for officers to intercede when observing excessive use of force, and it prompts internal reporting and investigation. So again, that won't go through unless the deadly force bill goes through. Assemblyman Lackey's bill, AB 127, which deals with driving under the influence of drugs. That allows research on cannabis-impaired driving to be conducted on California Highway Patrol premises. The research collected will be used to help generate data for standardization, which helps keep our roads and communities safe. This is an urgency bill and will take effect immediately if it is signed by the governor, and it is in the Senate Public Safety waiting to be set for a hearing. In the community, on June 23rd, we're partnering with Senator Wilk as well as Supervisor Barger, as well as some other groups and agencies for Jethawk's Job and Resource Fair, so I hope you all join us. And also on July 23rd, Assemblyman Lackey will be hosting a women's self-defense clinic at Antelope Valley Partners for Health, and that will be at 5:30. So that's about it, unless you have any questions. The budget, they need to pass a budget by June 15th. A couple of years ago, the voters said that the members could not get paid unless they passed that budget by the 15th. So every year since then, they have passed by June 15th. So you can expect a budget on the 15th. Any questions?
Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, public business from the floor. This is a time where people may address the Criminal Justice Commission on non-agendized items. Speaker cards are up front. You're limited to 3 minutes. I have 2 cards. First one, is it Jerica Finley? Yes. Did I pronounce that right? Oh. Thank you.
So my name is Jerica Finley. I'm from the Asian Youth Center. I'm here to inform everyone of a youth diversion program that will be in effect. We're kind of laying the foundation and the groundwork and outreaching and trying to collaborate with different organizations in the community. The people who are going to be in this program are youth 17 and under. If they come in contact with law enforcement, they will be referred to our program in lieu of them getting arrested, going to jail, or cited. We will provide them with services to reduce recidivism. The program is multifaceted, so it ranges from mental health services, substance abuse, employment, recreational activities, and tutoring. So whatever they need in order to keep them off the streets. So I just want to share that with everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Mr. David Paul.
Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, and Commissioners, good morning. You know, I tell you what, these meetings help me a lot, even though they're full of things that I didn't know. And nationally, you know, it's such a, I don't know, everybody looks at life differently, but I look at that stuff and just don't know what to do. And I'm just so grateful when I come here and see all this effort, because Mr. Dorico and Jocelyn, I had no idea that, you know, the complexity of what you deal with, even with the tenants and the all that stuff. It's amazing that we do so much great stuff. Captain Weber, thank you for all you're doing. There are a lot of things that are working. Now, one of the things, I went to an estate sale a couple weeks ago, and it was an old military guy that died, and he had a lot of books. I love books and military history, and one of the books he had was about L.A., and I was reading it. It's like a chronological history of the development, and back in the 1930s, there was a sheriff in L.A. that took more than 100 armed law enforcement officials up to the border of the state of California to block the hobo migration into L.A., which was then billed as this garden to come to and stuff, and that got worked out in court. But, you know, people are troubled, and I try and stay involved in the homeless. Now, this is the thing. Tomorrow night there's a meeting, and Jen didn't know about it, but it's like an offshoot. There's a group meeting at Crazy Autos to discuss homelessness and ways to do it, and they're not with any of the agencies, and they're going to talk about, you know, organization and having a place to go. So they want camps. They want somewhere for people to actually live in a confined space and put their own rules in and hold people accountable. And so I'm going to go to that, and I'll just keep you all posted. My friend across the street, correctional officer, I've known him for 20 years. We've lived across from each other, and he's telling me now that homeless people are around the corner sleeping behind my mailbox. So everybody's concerned, and I just always try and tell people that we're really working this. We're really trying to do more with less, and the situation gets worse as we get better at it. That's what gives me hope. So thank you all. We just stay at it, and it's inspiring to hear all the things that are going right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Commissioner comments, anything? Then we'll stand adjourned until July 10th, 2019, 10 a.m.